We're differently abled, differently.
Welcome back, and you're watching Abled Differently. You have heard Jackie's story and her journey in ensuring that her son is able to hear. On this second bit, we focus on SirLaja, a child development specialist, and also Lina Okwach, who is an auditory specialist. Take a look.
The cochlear implants are inserted under the skin just behind the ears surgically. And they usually have three parts. There's the external components, and then they also have internal components. The external components has a sound processor and a transmitter, meaning that there's what picks the sound from what people say or from the environment, and then transmits it. So internally, that is not the internal components, there is a receiver or a stimulator. So when sound is received, then it is passed through the transmitter to the internal receiver stimulator. Then now it is passed to the cochlea. This is the ear, and what you can see, it's called the pinna. This pinna makes what we call the external ear. And just past it, as you see the hole that you see inside, that is the beginning of what we call the middle ear. Then now we transition from the middle ear to deep inside, where we have what is called the inner ear. So as I speak, your outer ear collect the sound vibration, and then using this, it channels it inside this hole, or what we call the auditory canal. And then through the auditory canal, there's a membrane inside. It's called the tympanic membrane. Now the vibration hits that tympanic membrane, and it vibrates. Now when it vibrates, just behind the tympanic membrane, as we move inside, there are some three bones. So those three bones are made to hit each other, so that they magnify, they amplify that vibration, they continue that vibration. And then just from, I want us to get it, that now we are moving from the outer ear, then there's a tympanic membrane, which is something like this. So sound hits it and it vibrates. When it vibrates, there are some three bones. They are called the ossicles. The ossicles also start vibrating. That is now the middle ear. And then between the outer ear and then there's another border that now separates the middle ear and the inner ear. There is some fluid. Now when that fluid is kind of, let me use an informal term, shaken, then it triggers a continuation of that impulse transmission now to what is now called the cochlea. So it is inside that cochlea that the electrodes are being surgically implanted.
He says that not all types of hearing loss will require using a cochlea.
Conductive hearing loss involves the conductive components. Now these conductive components are the outer ear components and the middle ear components. So when there's a problem with the pinna, there's what we call the anotia, where somebody doesn't have the pinna, it's missing or it is blocked. There is nothing to collect the sound, to channel it through the middle ear and to the inner ear, where it is passed to the brain, and therefore somebody can hear and make meaning. Another thing is the middle ear. In the middle ear, there is tympanic membrane. This tympanic membrane in the middle ear, there may be some fluid accumulation, or there may be collapse of the auditory canal wall. So if it collapses, then the passage is blocked or is narrowed. If there's fluid, it blocks the passage. So anything that happens between the out and the middle ear, we call them the conductive component, they can lead to conductive hearing loss. So sound cannot be passed through the outer ear to the middle ear, and therefore it can't reach the inner ear for the normal processing of hearing. Mixed hearing loss is where there is some problem with the conductive components, but then there's also some problems with the with the inner ear components or the sensory neural components. So then that becomes a mixed hearing loss. And then there's what I studied with the sensory neural hearing loss, where there's a problem within the cochlea in the inner ear. There must be a hearing loss, and it must be a hearing loss of a specific type. As I said, it is what we call sensory neural hearing loss. Sensory neural simply implies that there is some nerve involvement. There is some impairment in the conduction that is done by the nerves from the cochlea to the brain. These people who have this kind of hearing loss, the sensory neural hearing loss, it also has to be severe to profound. Hearing loss is categorized from normal hearing, and these measuring, that grading in terms of normal or mild hearing loss is done based on what we call hearing intensity and the frequency that is measured in decibels. So somebody who has a hearing level of 20 decibel and below, meaning the conversation voice, then that person has normal hearing. But when it has to increase to a level of 25 to 40, then we talk of mild hearing loss, and then to moderate hearing loss, and then to moderately severe, and then we have severe to moderate hearing loss and profound hearing loss. So severe to moderate hearing loss, we start talking about 70 decibels, and then profound hearing loss is 90 decibels and above. But then it's not just that. There are other factors that are involved. For example, somebody may be having that level of hearing, but then has mental retardation. So it means something can be done through the path, but then because of mental retardation, which is also an outdated word, nowadays we talk of intellectual disability, and because of some form of intellectual disability, or because of some damage that happened to the brain, which was a bit more severe, then that then affects the ability of this person to be able to process and comprehend language or sound. So the sound may reach, but then meaning may not be made. And so speaking and hearing may not be achieved.
The procedure for determining a person who qualifies for the surgery is one that requires a team of specialists.
This decision is not made by an individual doctor. This is a decision that is made by a team of doctors. There is a neurologist who will look at the integrity, as I said, of the nerves. There is a radiologist who will look at the MRIs and the scan, look at the brain, look at the how the nerve conduction or the nerve transmission from the eyes to all the facial nerves, the integrity. And there's a psychologist or a child development specialist who will look at the intelligence of a child. How is the cognitive function of this child? How are the social skills of this child? Does this child have some signs of knowledge, some signs of speech acquisition? Are they likely to acquire speech with this cochlear implant that is implanted?
Once the team of specialists has given the okay to proceed, the surgery is now done and the cochlear device is implanted.
This team of surgeons will decide and say, well, if we do a cochlear implant for this person or for this baby, the chances of success is 90%, 80%, or such a percentage, and therefore we can go ahead and do the surgery.
After surgery, it is important that auditory verbal training is done to help distinguish different sounds.
For a period of around 14 days to 21 days, the site at which the procedure was done will be allowed to heal. The implant that was inserted, that is the receiver stimulator, and the electrode that were inserted, they are allowed some time. And then afterwards something follows. It is now called the activation. Now after the activation, what follows is now auditory verbal training. Now we want to teach this child to know that the sounds he's hearing They are different, they have meaning, they symbolize different things, they mean different things.
Auditory verbal therapy believes that hearing is about the brain. The ear is the doorway to the brain. So you train the brain, you retrain the brain, you retrain the auditory cortex of the brain to learn to listen. Because as you've learned, many parents, when you give your child cochlear implant, you give them hearing aids, you feel, okay, we have treated deafness. It's not like that. It's a journey. The journey starts after that. You have to encourage wear time. The child has to wear that device. We say when the eyes are on, when the eyes are open, the ears must be on. So once the ears are on, eyes are open, then you train their brain to listen through everyday activities.
Lina, who is an auditory verbal therapist, says the practice is not widely used in Kenya.
In Kenya, it's fairly new, so we say we have graduated once the child has gained those milestones. Audition, they can listen through their device. They have the speech outcomes. We have the language outcomes. That is when we graduate the child.
Speech therapy also helps in developing speech.
Und man
When we do auditory verbal training, then we achieve good listening skills. Then now we transition to speech therapy. So this person can now listen, they can now focus, they can appreciate sound. Now we start now teaching them how to speak.
SirLaja says that this process yields the best results when the implant is done before 3.5 years.
The higher success rate when the implant is done before 3.5 years, because these are kids, we call it the prelingual stage. These are kids who are not yet really acquired language. So for them it works best. But if a kid who has never acquired language, for example, a 7 years old deaf has gone for a cochlear implant, it may still succeed, but not with greater chances like for the case of a kid who was diagnosed early and for who implant was made early, and then auditory verbal therapy and speech therapy done in good time.
Lina reiterates this statement.
Early intervention. You know, there's something called neuroplasticity. There's a time when the brain is, like a sponge. It can easily absorb. And the earlier we do this, the better. We advocate that you go for testing. When the child is young, test their ears. As you test the eyes, test the ears. If they cannot hear, okay, or if you are going for the listening and spoken language, you are going to train them to speak. Implant early and start speech therapy immediately.
The process is always a smooth one and has no side effects.
Once the implant has been inserted, then you can't be with it as long as you're alive. Only in rare occasions where there is a failed implant. It was put, but it failed. Now, it can be redone surgically. That is one. Two is a situation where there's a new version or there's a new generation of implants. Of parts, and so the external components are no longer compatible with the internal components. So again, that one may necessitate some changes to be made.
Let's take a look at the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Article 25 of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities states that state parties shall, Part B, provide those health services needed by persons with disabilities, specifically because of their disabilities, including early identification and intervention as appropriate, and services designed to minimize and prevent further disabilities, including among children and older persons.
It is our hope that this episode has been informative. Thank you, Jackie and her son Maxwell, SirLaja and Lina Okwach, for finding time to make this episode a success. Until next time, I've been your host, Jen Theuri. Goodbye.
We are here and we are strong. Let's be counted as we move on. make a difference, change lives as we tell our different stories. We are capable, beautiful, we are born to do great things. We're unstoppable, incredible, 'cause we're differently abled, differently.